I had always believed that people were exactly what they showed on the surface. That was my default mode: judge first, understand later. It wasn't a cruel habit, at least not intentionally. It was instinct, a way to simplify the complicated world around me. I thought I was being practical, discerning, protecting myself from mistakes. But life has a way of teaching lessons when you least expect them, and I learned mine in the most unexpected place: a small coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. I was sitting at my usual corner table, sipping a latte, scrolling through emails, pretending I was too busy to notice anything around me. Then he walked in. I noticed him immediately, not because he was strikingly handsome or dressed in designer clothes, but because of the aura of quiet chaos he carried. He moved as if the world was weighing on him, eyes darting nervously, hands twitching like he couldn't decide what to do with them. My first thought, and the judgment came almost instantly, was that he was someone desperate, someone untrustworthy, someone best avoided. He ordered a coffee, his voice low, uncertain, and I could hear the irritation in the barista's tone as he corrected him for fumbling with the payment. My initial judgment hardened. Clumsy, impatient, probably entitled, I thought. I told myself I was simply being observant. After all, observation is just as important as judgment, right? He turned, scanned the room, and accidentally bumped into my table. My latte nearly tipped over, and I instinctively recoiled. He apologized quickly, awkwardly, almost painfully, as if the words themselves were a struggle. I nodded curtly, ready to return to my emails, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was an honesty there, a rawness I couldn't immediately define. My instinct was to dismiss it, to write him off as another careless stranger, but a flicker of curiosity made me glance again. The encounter repeated itself over several days. He came to the same cafe around the same time, always with the same nervous energy. He was awkward, yes, fumbling with his coffee orders, spilling a little here and there, making small mistakes in a world that demanded perfection. Every time I judged him, every time I muttered silently about his carelessness or oddness, something began to feel off. I noticed the way he lingered after paying, checking his phone anxiously, the way he flinched when someone raised their voice, the way his eyes softened when he smiled at children passing by outside the window. I began to sense a depth behind the surface. One rainy afternoon, I was leaving the cafe when I saw him sitting on the curb outside, drenched, his coffee untouched. The first impulse was judgment again, careless, ridiculous, pathetic, but something made me pause. I walked over, hesitated, then asked if he was okay. He looked up, startled, and then smiled faintly, a little embarrassed. I just needed a moment, he said, voice trembling slightly. It's been a hard morning. That's when I realized I had never really thought about what it meant to live in someone else's shoes. I had judged him as clumsy, careless, perhaps even unworthy of attention, without knowing a thing about him. And just like that, the walls I had built around my assumptions began to crumble. He told me his story slowly, haltingly. He had been caring for his younger brother while their parents were away for work, juggling jobs to pay the bills. He had recently lost someone important, someone he had relied on for stability, and that loss had thrown him into a state of perpetual distraction and anxiety. His clumsiness wasn't arrogance. It was exhaustion. His nervous energy wasn't entitlement. It was survival. Sitting there on that curb, I felt a mix of shame and enlightenment. How often had I dismissed people, labeled them, underestimated them based on what I could see at first glance? How many connections had I missed because I had allowed assumptions to define my perception? That day, I learned that understanding comes after listening, after patience, after setting aside the desire to judge. The more I got to know him, the more I realized how flawed my worldview had been. Judgment is easy. Understanding is difficult. Judgment requires nothing but observation and imagination. Understanding requires empathy, effort, and humility. Every time I opened myself to understanding, I discovered something richer, more complex, more human than I had imagined. He became a mirror for my own tendencies. I noticed how quickly I judged coworkers, strangers, even friends. A frown on someone's face might not mean rudeness. It could mean stress, sadness, worry. A hurried apology might not signal arrogance. It could be a plea for patience. I began practicing pause before judgment, asking questions before forming opinions, listening before reacting. It wasn't easy. Habits don't disappear overnight. One instance at work changed me profoundly. A colleague, normally composed, snapped at a team member during a meeting. My instinct was immediate judgment, rude, unprofessional, impatient. But I remembered what I had learned. I waited, asked quietly what had happened, and learned that the colleague had received devastating news that morning, news no one else knew. My judgment would have been unfair, damaging, and ignorant. Understanding, however, allowed me to respond with compassion and support. I noticed how relationships improved. Friendships deepened, conflicts decreased, and I felt lighter in interactions where I had previously carried hidden resentment or frustration. Life became more nuanced, less black and white, and infinitely more interesting. I realized that when you judge less, you don't just give others grace. You give yourself freedom from the way of assumptions. The lesson extended beyond people. I began judging circumstances less, experiences less, myself less. I started asking questions before condemning mistakes, listening before criticizing, reflecting before deciding. I found that even failure could be reframed if approached with understanding first. Every mistake became an opportunity to learn rather than a reason to criticize. By the time the summer ended, he had left town as quietly as he had arrived. But the lesson he left behind stayed with me. Fear of misunderstanding, of misjudging, became a guide toward mindfulness and empathy rather than a source of regret. I realized that everyone carries unseen burdens, stories untold, and layers are invisible at first glance. Understanding isn't optional. It's essential if you want to live deeply and connect meaningfully. I still catch myself slipping into judgment occasionally. It's human, but now, I remind myself to pause, to listen, to consider before concluding. The small moments, the whispered stories behind nervous energy or awkward behavior, are what make people real, rich, and deserving of attention beyond assumptions. Judge less, understand more. That mantra isn't just about kindness toward others. It's about clarity, growth, and humanity. Thinking first, questioning assumptions, seeking context before opinion, transforms interactions, relationships, and even one's own sense of self. It's a practice I carry daily, a quiet revolution of thought that began with one nervous stranger on a rainy afternoon, and changed the way I see the world forever. In the end, understanding doesn't excuse mistakes, but it illuminates truth. And truth, once glimpsed, makes judgment seem shallow, impulsive, and unnecessary. Life becomes deeper, connections richer, and the heart lighter. And I have never looked back.